Porn and the sex industry are really trendy right now. Like, it's become mainstream. I've spoken about it with a couple of my friends, and I quickly found that to be anti-porn or anti-sex industry is kind of an unpopular opinion now. Like, it's not cool to say that you're not about porn. And I thought I'd make this video because there's this whole narrative at the moment going around that sex work and pornography is empowering for women. It's kind of like this new brand of feminism, it's sexually liberating, it's all of these wonderful things, and if you're not about it, you kind of come across as this like, I don't know, conservative prude, and I just don't think that's the case. Like, I'm all pro-women, pro-sex, pro all that shebang, but I am very not about the porn industry or sex work, and sites like OnlyFans to me is just like the demise of society right in front of us. But I thought I'd make this video to go through some of the reasons for why people think sex work, sex industry, porn is all of these great things, why they think it's amazing or sex positive, etc., etc. And I'll be giving my reasons as to why I just think that that's so wrong. It's kind of going to be a controversial topic, but I don't know, I just think that it's important. And yeah, I just want to say off the bat that this isn't to shame anyone who does OnlyFans or who is in the sex industry or is a sex worker. I'm just here to critique the industry and the effects that it has on society. But obviously, always open to comments or criticism, so let me know. But without further ado, let's get into it. One of the major arguments in favor of sex work is that it's sexually liberating for women, that it allows them to explore their sexuality, explore their sexual preferences, their bodies, and that it helps to break down the stigma around sex. But I don't necessarily think this is the case. I don't think that sites like OnlyFans or pornography are the best medium through which women are sexually liberated, and here are my reasons why. So first of all, what is sexual liberation? What does it mean? Where did it come from? The sexual liberation movement in the 1960s challenged the norms of behavior related to sexuality and sexual relationships throughout the United States. The movement was created to remove the guilt or judgment that comes with freely meeting sexual needs. So at the time, 1960s, the society was incredibly puritanical, conservative, and really sexually repressed. And women in particular just did not have the freedom to express themselves as sexual beings. The very idea of them having sex outside the context of having babies or marriage was just like taboo. Like, it wasn't talked about, it was pretty much unheard of. So the women's liberation movement was a huge win for second wave feminism, and it totally makes sense that we should want women to be sexually liberated. But is it going to be done on platforms where girls are selling their bodies online for men? I don't think so. I just think that freely meeting women's sexual needs doesn't mean complying to male sexual fantasies for money. I think there's a difference. Speaking of difference, this is something that I think is so important, especially when we're thinking and talking about these issues and what it means to be sexually liberated as a woman and the whole sexuality thing. There is a huge difference between sexuality and sexualization. And while I feel like we have a lot of this one, I don't actually think that most women feel like they can have a healthy expression of this one. Sexualization occurs when a person's value comes only from their sexual appeal or behavior to the exclusion of other characteristics. This is basically saying that a person is only valuable, a woman is only valuable, if she is complying to the beauty standards of the time. And that excludes all her other characteristics. Her attractiveness is like the most important thing about her. And I mean, you just have to look at popular culture, look at your phone, go scroll on Instagram or TikTok, and tell me that it's not telling you that the most important thing about girls is being hot. Because that's the message I'm getting. And there are really few narratives highlighting women as capable, intelligent beings. And in terms of role models, most of my female role models on social media, like, I've chosen them because they're pretty or they have a really nice aesthetic, which in itself isn't a bad thing. I just think that it becomes problematic when it's the only thing that women are celebrated for. So yeah, that's the first one. The second one is a person is held to a standard that equates physical attractiveness, narrowly defined, with being sexy. This basically is saying that A person is only attractive if they are fitting the really narrow ideal of what it means to be sexy. So unless you look like Kylie Jenner or Kimmy K, aka you have a huge butt, a really tiny waist, flat stomach, and no cellulite, you're not attractive. You have to be sexy to be attractive. And I think this speaks to a lot of the issues that young girls have today. I feel like a lot of them feel like they have to be sexy to be seen. And they feel as if they don't fit that stereotype of what it means to be sexy, then like no boys are gonna want them. They're basically just like inexistent. And I just think that's so dangerous. And let me know what you think, but I definitely see a lot of this. The next one is, a person is sexually objectified, that is, made into a thing for others' sexual use, rather than seen as a person with the capacity for independent action and decision making. This is something that has always been an issue. The sexual objectification of girls and women is just like, yeah, it's been around for a long time, but I do think with platforms like social media and OnlyFans that it is just reinforcing the narrative that they are sexual objects for other people's desires and gratification. And I don't know, like to me, the entire premise of sex work and sites like OnlyFans in particular is that women are selling themselves, they're commodifying themselves as sexual objects for money. And like that's always been a thing, but make no mistake, that is an example of sexualization. It's an example of sexual objectification. That's probably not a really good thing to be running with. When you start viewing yourself as an object, it cancels out a lot of your other qualities. It doesn't treat you as this fully rounded human being with the capacity for thought, emotion, ambitions. It really just treats the individual as a thing for other people to derive sexual gratification from. And that does something to our heads. When we're constantly seeing ourselves as sexual objects, it's so hard to develop a sense of identity or develop values that aren't tied to our appearance. I really do think that the sex industry at large, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but the whole thing is about sexual objectification. So yeah, another example of sexualization. The last one is when sexuality is inappropriately imposed upon a person. The sexualization of teenage girls. They're still children, they're minors, and one of the top categories in mainstream pornography is teens. It is so harmful. You're naive if you think that teenage girls aren't looking at this and thinking, oh, like that's what I should be doing. That's what it means to be sexually empowered. Do I need to be doing that with my boyfriend? Is my body supposed to look like? Am I supposed to be doing that? Gen Z, millennials, we've grown up with porn being our main source of sexual education. And the fact that teens is one of the main categories, I think is a huge reason as to why we're seeing the disappearance of teens and tweens. It's just projecting this really adult, really hyper-graphic, violent idea of sexuality on them at a really young age. And I mean, the boys in their grade are watching this as well. So yeah, if that's not an example of, you know, the sexualization of girls at the hands of mainstream pornography or the sex industry, then I don't know what is. Okay, this explains it perfectly. Women aren't embracing their sexualities, they're embracing being sexualized. They're internalizing categories made by men and deriving pleasure from the thought of giving men pleasure and of being attractive in the third person and convincing themselves that this is the same thing as genuinely feeling sexual pleasure and agency. I honestly think what's happening is that we are embracing this hyper-sexualization as our actual sexuality. I think that we've been so indoctrinated with highly pornographic ideas of what sex looks like that we've actually taken that as our own and being like, yeah, this feels amazing. I'm doing good at this. It kind of reminds me of WAP. And don't get me wrong, the song is fine, I think it's catchy, but the idea that it was this female anthem for empowerment or feminism, I don't know, I was like, why do I hate this so much? It's because it just seemed like another way in which men were getting what they want. I think a lot of dudes that thought they had a problem with feminism probably don't have an issue with feminism if WAP is the emblem of what it represents. I think it's scary that we're telling women and young girls that the key to sexual liberation is through becoming a sex worker. No, it's a highly niche job catered to pleasing men for money. And that's cool. It's always been a thing. But to say that that's the avenue for this new breed of feminism, or that, it's empowering, I just think it's really dangerous. This is a post from a girl who is on OnlyFans, and it kind of highlights what I'm talking about. She said, "Every time I posted something, my followers would say, 'That's good, but it's not enough.' I felt like I had to keep getting more extreme. I told myself that I was empowered and I wanted to pretend that I was, but I felt horrible. I was smiling in those pictures, but I wasn't there. I was doing things like a robot." If you're being paid for sexual acts, services, pictures, you're not exactly in a situation where you're going to voice your very personal sexual preferences. It's a job. So unless you're having like a really bad day, you're probably not going to tell the customer to go shove that sandwich up their butt. You're going to say, "I will take that back to the kitchen for you." Yes, the customer is always right. Thank you. Because otherwise you're just losing business. Moving on. This one I want to make very, very clear. Sex work does not promote sex positivity. And this is where I think that we should distinguish between sexualized messages and sexual education. The depictions of women in mainstream porn are just the most degrading two-dimensional things you can imagine. It completely disregards the differences between male and female pleasure, and not only is it typically really violent and degrading and humiliating for women, it just also paints them out as these like vapid airheads, and it eliminates any context of real intimacy or trust, which are kind of essential ingredients when it comes to healthy sex. All the research shows us that pornography harms sexuality, it harms sex relations between men and women especially, and the idea that somehow the industry is actually so sex positive, no. There's a lot of sex happening, but it's not positive. And for anyone who has gone on porn or mainstream porn sites, you cannot tell me that the depictions of women are conducive to good or healthy ideas about sex or how you treat women. This is something that I feel like isn't talked about enough, but girls especially have such unhealthy expectations around sex and towards their own bodies, and the fact that young people are having less sex despite being more exposed to pornography than any generation before them is so telling. If the sex industry was so sex positive, given how popular it is, given how young children are exposed to it, you would think that the healthy relations between sexual partners would be on the rise, but all the research shows it is not good for our brains, it's not good for teens' brains. Sexual appetites are being artificially bumped up. The categories are becoming more and more extreme, and porn addiction is kind of brushed off as this like normalized thing, and I want to make something very clear. Porn is common, but it's not normal. It's a spectator sport. It's a really highly stylized form of violent entertainment, predominantly for men, increasingly for women as well, but it's not a representation of good or healthy sex. And the fact that it's most of our sexual education is really worrying. I talk to some of my friends who are on the dating scene, or we chat about experiences we have, and it is really sad to see that even the smallest dregs of like decency, respect, and trust are now held up on this pedestal as like, oh my God, wow. And it's like, no, that should be a non-negotiable when it comes to any sexual interaction. But you look at mainstream porn and it totally makes sense that women are having these awful, degrading experiences because it's kind of set the template. So yeah, the idea that pornography is sex positive is one that can just completely be laid to rest. And if you are unsure about this, I'm gonna link a bunch of resources below. I follow this incredible Instagram account that taught me a lot about the sex industry, the effects of porn that I never really considered before, but definitely check that out. But yes, porn is not sex positive. The sex industry at large is just the opposite of sex positive. The next argument that I want to tear down is the my body, my choice argument. This is always used in favor of sex work and the sex industry, and this is why I don't think that it applies, and this is why I don't think it's a defense against the harms of the industry. My body, my choice is all good if you're in a privileged situation, financially or otherwise. But for most women who enter the sex industry, they are doing so out of financial desperation or less than ideal circumstances. So to use the my body, my choice argument as like this blanket defense, even though there is known issues with human trafficking, with coercion, with the sexualization of minors, it's brushed off by a few women who enjoy the profession, who maybe did really choose it for themselves. And it completely disregards the voices of millions of other women who aren't doing it because, they think it's sexually liberating or this new brand of female empowerment. They're doing it because they might not have another choice. A lot of girls are now going into sex work because of OnlyFans, thinking that it's going to be this really fun, nonchalant way to make extra cash or whatever, and that's not the case. I made a video about OnlyFans and how it works, and I'll link it like in the description or above, but it wasn't empowerment that was pushing a lot of these girls into the sex industry. So the idea that a few women are now championing it as this like new breed of feminism, I think is so unfair to the millions of girls who are doing it because they don't have a choice. Feminism is about actually looking after women in society, not backing them into a corner where they feel like their bodies are their most viable source of income. Why is it that, men didn't flock to the porn industry when times got tough? It's because they're not indoctrinated with the message that their body is the most important thing about them, that their bodies are their most powerful asset. All right, my last and final argument as to why I am so against all of this. And I feel like this has been long, so if you're still here, thanks for watching. But my last point is that sexual harassment in the sex industry is part of the job. I was watching a YouTube video with a woman who was from the sex industry and now she helps girls out of it. I'll link the video below. And I think it's like 5 reasons why you shouldn't start OnlyFans. And I was like, I feel like there are 10, but yeah, give me 5. And she basically said something that really clicked with me. It's that sexual harassment is part of the job. We used to warn girls about sending nudes, about sexual predators, and now that it's become trendy and now that there's a price tag attached to it, we're like, you go girl, go get that coin, as if it were totally safe or normal for every Becky next door to be entering the sex industry. Think hard about the types of men and people that these girls are going to have to interact with. This is another post from a girl who was on OnlyFans. They can say some really explicit things to you. When I first started, I felt like I had to go along with it because they were paying. I didn't want them to unsubscribe. A lot of the time, I felt like it was bordering on sexual assault. When you have a platform that normalizes the predatory behaviors of men and tell women that it's totally fine and to expect it, how are they meant to navigate that? Or where's the line between harassment and sexual abuse and normalized, totally fine behavior? We would never want men or anyone to talk to us like that in real life or online. And now that it's becoming mainstream, now that there's money involved, somehow it's okay. We're trying so hard for women to be treated as equals, to get the respect that we deserve. And now we're not only putting up with atrocious behavior from anonymous men, we are brushing it off and actively encouraging it to young girls as this empowering new breed of feminism. I think a reason why it's so hard to speak out against the sex industry or, the idea of it becoming mainstream is that it can be seen as an attempt to suppress women or to shame them for their sexuality. And in some cases it can be. I have seen YouTube videos that have comments saying the most awful things about women who join OnlyFans, and that's just not fair. I'm not shaming women themselves or someone that is in the sex industry. I'm criticizing the industry itself, and I'm holding it accountable for all the horrible things that it does, and also a culture that sexualizes women and girls to the point of it being extremely harmful. I will say though that for celebrities and influencers that promote sex work to young people, no, that's not cool. Don't go promoting it to young people under the banner of empowerment. If you want to learn more about this, I've linked some really great resources below. I've also uploaded a podcast episode where I talked to my boyfriend about OnlyFans. I thought it'd be interesting to have a male perspective on the whole thing. And yeah, when you think about it, mainstreaming porn is just like this really weird thing. So yeah, definitely check it out. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.